All right, so this is going to be the introduction to Nigeria. So we see here a quote, Nigeria is not a nation, it's a mere geographical expression. So one of the really interesting things about Nigeria is thinking about a lot of the divisions that exist within the country, along a lot of the really interesting contrasts that we see within Nigeria. On one hand, this really interesting, fast-growing economic powerhouse within Africa contrasted with a lot of the issues related to economic development that exist in the country. So one of the kind of interesting things to go along with that is looking at some of the population issues that exist within Nigeria. Nigeria's population as of 2017 was about 191 million people. Now it's probably nearing about 200 million people. And the projected population in 2050 is 411 million. Sort of at the current total fertility rate. So what we see within Nigeria is really fast population growth, and Nigeria is projected to be the third largest country in the world in 2050, behind India and China. So a really important country for a lot of reasons, a lot of economic reasons, and a lot of demographic reasons as well. So some other kind of statistics that stand out to me as it relates to the population structure for Nigeria. Some of the lowest life expectancies in Africa, so 53 years. Infant mortality rates are relatively high, around 6.9%, so 69 per thousand, and really high fertility rates and a large youth dependency ratio. So Nigeria has sort of the population structure of a less developed country. And really a lot of those issues are worth keeping in mind as we talk a lot about the economics and the politics of Nigeria, because a lot of that is really interesting to think about what Nigeria will look like in the future. Kind of going back to this about Nigeria's ability to essentially hold itself together. And you can see visually kind of a map that shows fertility rates within the country. So the amount of average children per woman, very high in the north, kind of low, relatively speaking, in the south. So sort of interesting dynamics in terms of population growth as well in different regions within Nigeria. And another kind of representation of kind of a major issue that exists within Nigeria is the violence that's taken place in the last 10 to 15 years, mostly in northern Nigeria. So we talked about kind of the contrast of southern Nigeria, lots of economic growth in Lagos and in other kind of big cities in the south, lots of kind of vibrant economic activity. And in the north, a lot of violence, a lot of difficult kind of political conditions, and some really difficult kind of issues for the government to contend with. All right, so why study Nigeria in general? So we see Nigeria as a less developed country that is trying to democratize. So we talked about in the other video sort of the long history of military backed authoritarianism. So essentially like military dictatorships within the country. So this was not uncommon for sort of post-colonial Africa. And Nigeria faces a lot of the same issues that many countries in Africa do, sort of the drive towards democratization. So I think studying Nigeria is a really interesting kind of case study in studying a lot and kind of a lot of the same issues that are being faced in places like the Democratic Republic of the Congo and the Sudan and sort of other really important countries that exist within Africa. So trying to sort of throw off the history of colonialism, the history of military rule, which still leave sort of remnants behind in terms of the structure and the institutions of Nigeria's politics, as well as sort of the shorter periods of parliamentary democracy and presidential democracies that have come after them. So I think probably the most important kind of thing to look at in Nigeria are the ethnic and religious and regional cleavages that exist within the country. So we have started talking about that, and we'll talk about that more. Nigeria has the largest population in Africa, like we said, projected to grow to be the third largest in the world by the mid-century, as well as the largest economy in Africa. And in many ways, really interesting growth that's happening in a lot of different sectors, sort of just beyond oil. So a lot of rich people in Nigeria, and sort of big levels of economic inequality that exists within the country. So a lot of that has to do with oil and something called the resource curse, which affects kind of the economic inequality within the country, as well as a lot of other issues like corruption and the environment and things like that, which we'll look at. And the last big thing to look at within Nigeria that is connected with corruption are kind of the patient client system that exists. So within Nigeria, this is called prebendalism, which is a lot of the same thing as corporatism, which we talked about in Mexico, has a connotation of being more connected to kind of ethnicity. So we will discuss that. All right. So, kind of thinking about where does Nigeria get its legitimacy from? And kind of the short answer is, in many ways, the government doesn't get its legitimacy from anywhere. It has kind of an extremely low level of legitimacy compared to many other countries. But um, kind of a pretty young country in general, which underwent sort of its most recent regime change just kind of back in 1999, and really only had its first transition between parties about 5 years ago. That kind of when the ruling party loses. So that is in some ways a sign of a maturing democracy is the ability to lose an election. So as we talked about before, highly fragmented along ethnic, regional, and religious lines. So you for much of Nigeria's history, you've had the sole stable institution within the country be the military, which sort of explains the history of military rule within the country. So you still have a little bit of that creeping in today, with a lot of different issues, but sort of the military being called in to do things that militaries probably shouldn't be doing. And many of Nigeria's leaders have been generals in the past for this reason. Massive, massive, massive levels of corruption, and kind of in turn distrust of government within Nigeria too. So that all leads to sort of what is called the national question, which is sort of what is holding Nigeria together? Why is kind of other than the fact that it was kind of left as a country, what is going to be Nigeria's future in terms of its ability to be a legitimate kind of country to its citizens? Uh, in terms of structure, you can see here looks pretty close to the United States. Bicameral legislature, even called the Senate and House of Representatives, president and vice president, bureaucracy. One thing you'll notice is Sharia courts, which that is sort of a devolved power to many to kind of the Muslim part of the country, northern Nigeria. The ability to have laws and courts that are based more off of uh, religious laws than the rest of the country. So we'll talk a little bit about that and what that actually looks like. And then in terms of just the basics for institutional stuff for Nigeria, so it's classified as a democracy. So generally speaking, as a fragile one, or an illiberal democracy, or a transitioning democracy, transitioning from this history of authoritarianism and military rule that um, kind of defined it from 1960 to 1999. Also as a federal state, but like Mexico, extremely weak local and state governments. So it's divided into 36 states plus its capital. And there are local and state governments, but they have a hard time doing much of anything most of the time because of funding and kind of lack of consistent funding. Like we said before, presidential system, bicameral legislature. So the lack of checks and balances makes the presidential power very strong within the country and makes the central government very strong kind of within the country as well. All right, thanks. Bye.